Hi, everybody. Welcome to MC2UCLA Social Science webinar. I am Fetty, and I'm going to be your host for today. Thank you for tuning in. We got a lot of really cool things to discuss. We have Adriana, Adrian, and Roberto here to discuss different applications of humanities-oriented majors or social science-oriented majors. So without further ado, we are going to first announce that the video is being recorded and it will be posted to YouTube or other academic supplemental content for a professor at Moorpark College's class to supplement with his students' learning. We also do have a STEM webinar coming soon that we will be in the post about. So before we get started, I'm just going to go ahead and go in a circle. And I'm just going to start by introducing ourselves. If we can have Adriana start us off. So just go ahead and introduce what your undergrad major or minor was, which community college you attended, which university you transferred to, and what you are currently doing now with your degree.
Yeah, thank you for getting us started, Fade. So I'm Adriana. I went to Moorpark College and I transferred into UCLA with to receive my BA in psychology, and I minored in community engagement and social change. And currently I am a first-year master's student at CSUN's clinical psychology program with an emphasis on research.
Great, thanks for that. We can go on to Adrian or Roberto. Feel free.
I'll go ahead. So my name's Adrian. I went to Moorpark College. I had a bit of a non-traditional path at Moorpark. I did dual enrollment while I was in high school, and then I transferred out in 2018. I went to UC Berkeley, where I majored in legal studies. I minored in public policy, and right now I'm working in development. That's where I'm at now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Roberto Perez, and I attended Moorpark College, got my associates in political science. And then after that, I went to Cal State University Northridge, where I also studied political science and got my BA there with an emphasis on public policy and management. And then right now, currently, I'm also pursuing my master's degree in public administration with an emphasis on public policy and management as well. And then currently for my work, I'm working as a caseworker for the Los Angeles City Council District 14.
Great. So it seems like we have a very diverse range of experiences and different work opportunities, as you can see here. So we're just going to start off the webinar by discussing what drew you to your major during undergrad. This can be very open-ended. You could discuss your personal experience with your major, maybe what you wish you knew before, what you wish you knew, or what you learned after. And when did you find out that your major was right for you? Any particular experiences in your life that made you realize that your major was the right major for you?
Yeah, so I can get started with answering this. I was initially drawn to psychology in high school. I took an AP psychology class, and I just kind of fell in love with all of the topics that we would cover. And eventually I realized I had this interest in mental health. So naturally that, kind of led me to studying psychology. And then as I studied psychology as an undergrad, I realized there was a lot more to it than just mental health. So I had the opportunity to kind of figure out like where my niche was, where my interests lied. But I found myself again in mental health research. So I think really what made me understand that it was something I wanted to do kind of for the rest of my life was once I got into research and I was able to study populations that I was interested in, populations that reflected my own experiences and my own background. And that's really where I found my fit. I'm happy with the decision I made. And yeah, I really think that all those experiences in undergrad were really instrumental in making sure that I feel confident in what I'm studying.
I can go next. And so I think for me, the moment when, I was a lot younger and I thought, political science is a thing I want to study was also like around high school time when I was taking AP government as well. And I thought, well, this is something that really interests me. And I started to think more and more about, just at the local level, exactly how policy impacts our daily lives. Because a lot of people, when they think about political science, they think a lot of like federal and state legislation and things of that nature, but in our day-to-day lives, all the policy that really is impactful to us on a daily basis is that of local policy. And so that's what pretty much drew me to local government as well. And so I knew, like, kind of going from Moorpark to Cal State Northridge, that local government was something that I really wanted to specialize in as well.
Well, I'll jump in and say, to be completely honest, I had no clue what I wanted to do when I was at Moorpark. I knew that I had certain strengths in certain academic fields and I had weaknesses in others. And so I narrowed it down by, do I want to go the STEM route or do I want to go a different route? And I realized I had some skills with writing, reading, analyzing, and I started looking into majors. I applied to 18 different schools when I was at Moorpark just to see what I could get in for. And when I applied for Berkeley, I applied for legal studies. I didn't actually know about the minor in public policy until I was a year in there. But what ended up happening and how I ended up getting led to Berkeley was Moorpark College didn't send my transcripts over to the other 18 schools. And my admissions that I got all rescinded except for Berkeley. So I decided, do I take a gap year or do I just go to Berkeley? And my gut instinct was go to Cal. So I did. And when I got there, I started to see a lot of, there was a lot of stuff that I was overwhelmed with the amount of opportunities that I had when I first got there. So the more that I got active in clubs, the more that I started just going and branching out and taking different classes my first year, I kind of realized, hey, I think I actually do want to major in legal studies. It's a very versatile minor. You can use it for anything. Having a firm background with reading and writing is really what kind of drove me to the major, because I figured, I don't actually know what I want to do when I graduate. So I need something that it will be useful in all industries. And that's kind of why I did that. So that's what drove me to the major, why I'm at Cal. And then while I was there, I was part of a bunch of different political organizations and clubs. I started getting involved with a pre-law fraternity called Phi Alpha Delta when I was there. It helped me to get a lot more background and exposure to the legal industry, where that inspired me to work as a paralegal. And then I was actually going to apply to law school, but I decided not to, and I decided I wanted to have a couple more years to just kind of branch out and see what I can do with my major. And that's where I'm at now.
Great. Thank you so much, Adrian, for such an honest response. That was very interesting to see. And also just a friendly reminder that everything does seem to work out at the end of the day when it when it could probably feel very stressful. I'm sure that felt very, very stressful hearing that you had 18 schools rescind your application. And look where you
want
are.
to say, I just want to remind everyone, you don't have to have it figured out at this stage. Even when you graduate, you don't have it figured out. You're just kind of winging it and you're going and you're learning, and that's what happened.
Absolutely. Definitely. Would anybody like to add to that?
Yeah, I think what Adrian brought up is so important, like this lesson of just exploration and not being so closed-minded and set. This is how my life is going to happen. I think sometimes unexpected things happen for the better. So thank you so much for sharing that, Adrian.
Absolutely. Great. Yeah, I would also like to comment. Although I am not a humanities major, I also did experience some uncertainty and doubt, and I took a lot of different classes during my time at Moorpark College, and I have no regrets about it at all. It was a great experience. So if you do have those opportunities to explore other interests, I highly advise it. Okay, awesome. We're going to move on to the next question now. Pardon me looking to the right. I'm just looking at my other screen to reference the master document that we are using. So what experience during undergrad or during community college would you say led you to where you are today? So maybe mention any relevant internships or relevant volunteer experiences that you may have had.
So I can get us started. Oh, sorry, Roberto, you can go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to mention that from my personal experience, when I was both at Moorpark and Northridge, that I hadn't really done any internships or really volunteered up until I want to say it was the last semester of my senior year during my undergrad. And so just kind of going back up from our last point as well, you don't have to have everything figured out for you or think, I have to go down a certain path. And, things do take their time. And so, as long as you're, willing to network, and that's going to be a big topic of conversation that we're going to have today about networking. And I know Adriana and Adrian, you guys can agree that networking in our studies is very big. And so that's going to be something that we're going to talk about later on as well. But yeah, just saying that, those internships and volunteer experiences, take every opportunity that you can while you have it available, because again, that's where that networking part is going to come in, and it's going to play a huge role in the future.
I would also add on to that in addition to internships, another really good way that you can get started with networking aside from actually working is joining clubs. You can join clubs at Moorpark. You can join clubs wherever you end up transferring. That's ultimately what led me to where I am today. When I graduated from Cal, I had 3 months of experience working for the Parks and Rec in Conejo Valley. I had no internship experience, but I did join a lot of clubs. I did a lot of community engagement and outreach through those clubs, and that's what helped me to network and get to where I am today. That's actually what got me my first job, was just joining clubs, networking, meeting people, and staying in contact. So I would say even don't feel discouraged if you don't, have an internship by your sophomore year or by the time you're graduating from Moorpark. Like, there's a lot of opportunities. You can do it at any stage in your career.
Yeah, so I really agree what Roberto and Adrian have shared. When I was at Moorpark, I had zero like research experience or internship experience. I really was just focusing on my studies, but once I got to UCLA, there really was just so much opportunity. And I think there's even more than what you can take on. So it is important to have an open mind and explore what's available to you. But also sometimes you want to be a little, I guess, like picky with what you do take on. And something that worked for me, like a strategy that worked for me, was kind of choosing things that really aligned with my values and my interests and starting there. So for example, I started with, mental health research and really focusing on mental health. And that's how I was able to network and meet people that were working in the field that really interested me. And that's how networking started. And like Roberta was hinting at, we're definitely going to talk about that a little later. But referring to the question that Fadi asked, getting into research was really the most important kind of like volunteer internship type experience I had in undergrad that really changed the trajectory of my career and got me to where I am right now. When I first started undergrad, I had no idea that I wanted to get into research. I went into the field of psychology thinking I wanted to be a therapist. And then starting as a researcher, I realized, whoa, I don't want to be a therapist at all. Like, I love the world of research. So I think sometimes taking that chance on something that's maybe similar to what you like, but also a little different can be really important. And so through my research volunteering, I was able to meet a lot of great people that were showing me what's going on in the current field. And that kind of led me to where I am today, continuing to get paid as a graduate research assistant, and eventually I want to pursue my PhD. So I think that was my most notable like volunteer experience.
Great, excellent. Thank you for all of that. It seems like we have a common theme, which is how important networking is in this particular field. And that's going to actually tie into our next question very smoothly. So, how have you personally networked within your field? What tips do you have for networking? Um, Networking does seem like this very blanketed term that a lot of people use freely. And it may be mystified as in what does networking look like? Is networking um, going to meetings with your friends or going to meeting with your colleagues? Is it does it manifest as in catching up with them? Does it manifest with having more meetings? What does networking look like to you on a professional level?
I can start with this one. So kind of how, like I was saying, how I got my first job was I had joined political organizations and clubs and, stuff that I was interested in, movements and causes that I was interested in fighting. And through that, I ended up meeting a lot of really cool people who were connected with other like nonprofits, political organizations, political parties. And then just, I think the biggest tip I have is you can network, you can meet people, but the trick with networking is actually maintaining those connections. So I ended up becoming best friends with the girlfriend of somebody who got me my first job. I had no clue that they had those kinds of connections, but I had maintained a really good relationship with a lot of people that I had met. And at the end of my senior year, he reached out and he was like, hey, like, I know of this position. Somebody reached out to me looking to hire for this position, and I think you would be really good for it. And he pulled some strings, got me an interview, and here we are. So I'm saying the biggest tip that I have for networking would be to maintain the connections that you have, because those connections have connections and you never know where it will lead.
I completely agree with Adrian as well. Like, for example, when I volunteered after my senior year at Cal State Northridge as on a mayoral campaign for the city of LA, that's really kind of where my work experience took a turn for the better, in that I was the organizer behind that mayoral campaign pretty much essentially became my mentor, which is, also another reason why this program is so great, because I wasn't expecting to find a mentor through that in specific campaign or internship experience. And so she was really able to kind of put me in touch with a lot of different people at the local level through the city of Los Angeles. And when I reached out to her asking, if I'm looking for a job, what do you recommend? And, she was able to essentially, talk me through the process and kind of tell me what opportunities are out there in the city to work for specifically. And then that's how I ended up becoming a caseworker for the LA City Council District 14. And on top of that too, I have a good friend who I met through that internship experience as well. And just most recently, he applied to the Los Angeles Department of Transportation internship program. And I remember specifically he had mentioned to me, oh, I don't know about applying, because I initially had given him that opportunity to apply. And he said, oh, I don't know about applying. I don't have a master's degree. They say they're looking for a master's degree. And I was like, just apply. And so he did. And then he ended up getting it. So I'm very proud of him for that as well. And so that's why I think mentorship is just a great opportunity for those people as well.
Yeah, totally agree with both of you. I think networking can kind of has this connotation of it being you have to be reaching out to a lot of people at once, and you need to be this extrovert who really puts yourself out there, but it looks different for everyone. And personally, I'm a bit of a more of an introverted person, so I focused on making meaningful connections with people one-on-one and kind of with less people, but and ended up working out anyway. Like, for example, I developed this great networking relationship with a clinical psychology PhD student at UCLA. And it's one of my most meaningful mentorship relationships that I have to this day, like 3 years later. So really, I think it's quality over quantity a lot of times. And it's also important to emphasize that a lot of times these are going to be two-way relationships. So it's not just that you're taking from them, you're going to them just for advice or just for answers. You also want to make sure that you're giving back to them and you're providing support to them, or also assisting them on their projects. And those relationships are really important to maintain and to give back to.
Great. These are all really excellent points. So we're going to move on to our next question now. So what are different career paths or opportunities within your respective field? And if you can once again just reiterate what your degree is, and maybe similarly related degrees, or what does your field entail that different degrees might accomplish?
So I'd love to answer this question. I think psychology is one of those fields where a lot of people go in thinking it's just mental health. But it's really not. There's so much that's available to you with a psychology degree. There are people that go into marketing. There are people that go strictly into research. You become, really acquainted with statistics when you're in psychology. So you have a lot of opportunity with that. There's people who end up going to law school or med school. So there's a lot of opportunity. But I'm going to speak specifically within mental health because I know that's something that interests a lot of undergrads. So if you're interested in going into the field of mental health, either as, a researcher or like as a provider professional, there are other degrees that can accomplish that. So for example, if your goal is to be a therapist, you can get your bachelor's in psychology, but you will eventually need to get a master's degree in either like a licensed marriage family therapist, but you can also get a degree in social work and accomplish that through social work. You could be a licensed clinical social worker. So there are quite a few different ways that you can get to that path, but you could also get your PhD in clinical psychology and you can be a clinician, you can be a therapist, but also a researcher and also a professor. Or you could, now there's this degree called a PsyD, so a doctorate in psychology, which is more clinically focused, which is better if you're interested in just therapy rather than research. So kind of, I think what I really would want undergrads to take away is that psychology is not just mental health and there's so many paths you can take. But if you're interested specifically in clinical psychology, you kind of need to decide whether you're interested in on the clinical side in practice, like applied psychology or research. And that can really help you distinguish what path you want to be on.
I also want to chime in and thank you. That's really good. But also it's important to keep in mind too that no matter what you major in, especially in the social sciences realm, it all intersects. There's so many times where I work with people who have environmental science degrees, who have law degrees, who have political science degrees. I work with people who have psychology degrees. It all depends on what you do with that degree. I will say you can go into pretty much any industry. It's all about how you market yourself. So even I see an intersection between policy work and psychology when you look at, for example, homelessness. You need people on both sides to come together and use their skills to solve the problem. And so it's all in how you market yourself for sure.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you guys on that as well, because even a lot of people on our staff, like for example, our legislative deputy currently, she was telling me the other day that she comes from a STEM background too. And I thought that was really interesting because she's doing, legislative work here in the city council level while she has a, STEM background. So again, when it comes to, what path to take, and the sky is really the limit. And like Adrian said, you just have to know how to market yourself and what it is you actually want to do as well. Because at the end of the day, the degree is there as like a starting foundation point, but it's what you do afterwards with that is really gonna, be impactful for you as well. And I think just speaking from the local government level, if you're majoring in political science, you can really do anything involved, such as like casework, being a field deputy. So being out in different field offices within the city council districts that are available, and also even doing legislative work as well. And so again, it just goes back to how you market yourself and what your specific interests within political science are. Because again, a lot of political science majors end up going to law school. Some of them end up working for private entities that intersect with local governments as well. And so that's really how, the political science department kind of ties it all in together as well.
Yeah, I think I just want to make a clarifying statement. Yeah, I think, many of these degrees are overlap and there's a lot of intersecting points. But when it comes to mental health, some of these careers do require a license to practice. So just keep that in mind. If those are one of your goals, like you do want to be a therapist, that does require a license related to your field. But if you're interested in research or working in the community, definitely, I think many majors are applicable to that work.
Great. So I just want to open up to see if we have any questions because we are doing good on time. So any questions up to this point from Haley or Zach? Great. So if they do come in, just feel free to go ahead and DM them to me directly if you want to remain anonymous, or you could just put them in the chat. So what would you say, how did you personally find your niche or your specialty within the particular field that you just discussed?
I could start with this one. So when I first graduated from school, I started working on a congressional campaign that was highly targeted. It was actually the #1 most targeted campaign in the entire United States. And with that came a lot of demographic and field research. So I was researching a lot about land. And it was very interesting. I was like, okay, these are skills I'm never going to use, whatever. I don't know where my life is going. And then after I finished out my work there and I started working as a paralegal, ironically, I was doing corporate law, but also estate and trust law, which requires a lot of research for properties. And I was like, okay, there seems to be some type of common theme with my skills and with my career that's taking me in this direction. And after I finished working there and I went to my new job, I started working in development, which requires a lot of field research, a lot of land research. And I started to notice a lot of commonalities between that. And my career is sort of shaping up to be very land related. I don't know how else to describe it, but I started just noticing commonalities between what my skills were and where I was working, and then kind of tying those together to make up my resume.
Yeah, and I think in my experience as well, a class that I took at Cal State Northridge was public administration. And that's something that when I was taking, I kind of, just thought, okay, well, this is kind of theoretical. But it wasn't until when I did my mayoral campaign internship in the city of LA that I finally understood, what it means to actually put this theory into use. And so, for example, when I was making phone calls on the weekends at one of our field offices that we were working out of, I was connecting directly with constituents of these areas. So, for example, it was Boyle Heights, El Sereno, Lincoln Heights, and so predominantly Latino communities up there as well. And so just being able to speak with them and have a one-on-one conversation about what it is that they, had problems with, whether that was like a pothole that needed to be repaired on their street, or a broken street light that they wanted fixed, or trash or debris that was left outside of their house. All of those issues kind of really resonated with me as well. And I took that back and I thought, well, these are everyday issues that, might go unnoticed to some people, but to these other people and to myself, I thought, well, these are what make a difference. And so I think that's really what led me to wanting to work specifically in local government here in the city of LA as well.
Yeah, so a lot of what Roberto and Adrian shared really resonates with me. I think I started with an interest in wanting to do work related to my community. And so what I did is I specifically sought out research opportunities at UCLA that were related, one to mental health, but also related to underrepresented and marginalized identities. And just naturally, like a lot what Adrian was saying, like taking that one opportunity eventually led me to a lot of other opportunities that were related to culture and mental health. And that path just kind of naturally started to become paved for me. I started taking, like using personal life skills I have, such as, being able to speak Spanish. It led me to opportunities that were more exclusive to people with that skill set. So, just using those skills that you have and building on them really helps you kind of find where your identity and where your place is within your field. And of course, bringing in your interests and your strengths. But yeah, I think really sometimes it's just like a natural path that starts when you take that first really great opportunity you have that you're really passionate about.
Great. We're going to move on to our next question. What is a piece of advice you would personally share with undergrads who are pursuing your field today, or even in general? What is a general piece of advice you might give to anybody in community college?
So I'd really love to answer this one. And I think we've kind of been touching on this before. But I think it's so important to explore and to be open-minded to opportunities and not kind of like closing yourself off to this like rigid path you have. I think that that was something that maybe I got started with where I thought, no, like I only want to do things related to mental health. I only want to do things related to culture. And that did end up working out for me. I did end up, pursuing those opportunities. But also like keeping my mind open to other fields, such as I ended up with an internship in public health, which I never thought I would end up doing. But I learned so many valuable skills that have contributed to making me the researcher that I am today. So, really, just to summarize, I think having an open mind and exploring what's out there for you, I think that's really an important lesson to kind of keep in mind.
Yeah, and I agree with Adriana as well. And another thing that definitely I would have taken more advantage of had I known was even at Moorpark and Cal State Northridge was really connecting with your professors and really seeking their advice as well, because again, they're teaching your subject for a reason, and that's because they're experts in their field and they have a lot of background experience and decades of experience working in that particular field. And so that's something that I wish, had I known better, I would have connected with more professors at both Moorpark and Cal State Northridge. And so I would say definitely take advantage of that opportunity as well, because they probably have a lot of different resources and people that they know that you might not even think about. And so I definitely encourage those people to definitely talk to their professors more often as well.
I would also say, speaking to the point of branching out, I can't tell you how many times in school I would joke and tell people I will never work in politics. I think it's corrupt, blah, 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 list all these reasons. I will never work in politics. And here we are. I would say my biggest piece of advice would be to trust your gut. And like Adriana was saying, branch out. Do not stick yourself in a box. You have to be willing to explore majors, explore clubs, explore industries, explore jobs. Just get out there and learn. And then your niche will come to you. You'll know it, you'll feel it, and it will just stick.
Great advice. I agree with all of it. Okay, so we have our last question for the day before we move on to student questions. So what does a day working in your respective field look like? Would anybody like to start off?
I can start if you guys want. I
Sure.
will say it's crazy. I have never had a day where I go to work knowing what to expect. It is always something different, and there's really something beautiful about that because you're learning something new every day. I would say for right now, what I'm doing is you wake up, you get ready, you go to work, and then the first thing I do is I check my 100 emails that I get overnight. And somehow magically these emails show up overnight. You get through all your emails and then you start working on projects. You have to take time throughout your day to manage your workload, to stay organized. And all of that is hard, especially if you don't really know what to expect. Something new always comes up. But I think that there's a lot to be said about that. Like I was saying, you're learning something new every day. And that's how you grow. So I think with a day-to-day look at it, you can't really say like every day is the same. And that's what's beautiful about working in social science.
Yeah, and I agree with that, Adrian, because, well, for my work as a caseworker for LA City Council, typically, and I'll just give kind of a brief overview, most of my work entails, handling constituent casework calls. So if a constituent calls into our office, I will help with whatever request that it is that they have, whether that's submitting what's known as a 311 request. So for an example, like a broken street light, pothole, debris left out outside of someone's house, things like that is what I primarily handle. But also, like you said, managing projects and being able to manage your time effectively and efficiently is super important, because you also have to take care of your own mental health too, because at the end of the day, you are a human being and you're not a robot who can just, answer emails, take phone calls, and help everyone out all in one day. you also have to, kind of have that level of self-awareness and realize that you need to take a break at one point in time as well. And like Adrian was saying, is that in working in local government, there's never one day that is like normal. Like for example, I'm trying to think of, well, back in June, there was a pretty significant apartment complex fire in downtown LA, which is part of our district as well. And so when I ended up showing up to work, I thought, okay, just be like a normal 9 to 5 day. Well, that fire ended up happening around like late afternoonish. And so we had to go out there and kind of help out the residents of that apartment complex and find them, another place to live at, to, food to eat, water to drink. And so that ended up taking, I think, until like around 11 o'clock at night or midnight. And so you just never know exactly what a day is going to entail. But yeah, I mean, overall, just being able to manage your time efficiently and effectively is going to be super important, because again, you want to make sure that not only are you handling your work effectively, but you're also taking time to yourself as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, both of you. My field is a little different. I think it tends to be a little more predictable. So I can only share my experiences as a first year master's student right now. So, the work of a clinical psychologist or a PhD might look a little differently. But currently, my day pretty much looks like about going to class for about 3 to 4 hours. And most of my day is taken up by doing research. So we're doing not only quantitative research, but a lot of qualitative research. So that involves, communicating with community members or listening to hours of interviews and transcribing them, taking, notes of interviews or reading a lot of literature. So that's mostly what my day looks like, answering a lot of emails and, acquainting myself with literature and a lot of writing. I would say 90% of my day is reading and writing. But that's just in terms of mental health research.
Great. Is there anything you three would like to add? Anything you wish you touched up on? Any burning statements you want to add before we move on to student questions?
I just want to add, I think there's a narrative going around, especially among our generation, that a 9 to 5 or working in social sciences is just responding to emails all day. And I will say that's not actually true. I will say that there is some truth to that. Yes, it's a lot of reading and writing, it's a lot of emails, but there's also a lot of excitement that comes with it. You have days where something hits the news and you're like, oh, interesting, like how that relates to blah, blah, blah. And then you have meetings, you have, you start mini campaigns, you do all kinds of things to get involved in more than just a capacity of I'm doing the same thing every single day. I think that's important to note so that you don't feel discouraged when you're out branching out and looking for opportunities in all these industries.
Yeah, Adrian, I completely agree with you on that as well. And that it's not just a normal 9 to 5, at least in our experiences. Because, for example, like I've had to staff the council member on weekend events that we host as well. A lot of the neighborhood council meetings that I attend and Los Angeles Police Department meetings are in the afternoon hours or late evening hours, like 6, 7 o'clock at night. And so there is definitely a lot of more hours than just your typical 40-hour workday. But like you said, it's fulfilling. It's all the experiences and that you learn along the way, the people you meet, and just all the excitement that comes along with it is, something that I love.
Great. So we're going to move on to the first question, and this is actually for Adriana. So, what's the difference between a master's and a PhD in psychology, and why should somebody decide to get a master's or a PhD? What can one do with a master's that maybe they can't do with a PhD, and vice versa? What can somebody with a PhD do that they can't do with a master's?
Okay, yeah, I'll be able to answer this in terms of clinical psychology. So currently I am pursuing my master's in clinical psychology, and I am doing that with the intention of
Sorry to
eventually.
interrupt. When you say clinical psychology, do you mean a PsyD degree?
No. So I'll get into that in a moment. So maybe I should start by defining what every degree is. So you can get your master's in clinical psychology. So that'll mostly be, taking classes related to mental health, but also learning a lot of research skills, but you're also going to learn applied skills. Like, for example, in my program, eventually we're going to be practicing CBT therapy and with some clients at CSUN. So that's part of that. A PhD is a more research-oriented degree in clinical psychology. So while you will be trained to practice psychotherapy, most of your time will be dedicated to research and building your research skills. Then there's a PsyD degree, which I'm a little less familiar with, but from what I understand, it's mostly focused on the applied part of clinical psychology. So focusing on building your clinical skills, your applied skills, less emphasis on research. So like I kind of touched upon earlier, at least from my understanding, clinical psychology is kind of divided between whether you're going to research or whether you're going to practice as a therapist or a provider or a community, worker within your field. So with the master's degree in clinical psychology, that is a research-oriented degree. However, you can also get your master's in marriage and family therapy, and that allows you to be a therapist. You can get your master's in clinical social work that allows you to be a therapist, or the degree that I'm doing, like I said before, is research oriented. So really it depends where you want to go with your career trajectory. If I were to stay with just my master's degree in clinical psychology, I could go into research, I could, go into government, but I could not practice as a clinical psychologist. So to be a clinical psychologist, you do need your PhD. And a clinical psychologist have the opportunity to be, higher level professors. They can practice as therapists, but they can also give assessments, which is something that is exclusive to clinical psychologists. So really, like I said, just to reiterate, the difference is whether you're interested in pursuing being a therapist or applied psychology or research. I hope that clarifies that. Let me know if if there was anything else that I didn't cover there.
I think that was great. Yeah. So we're gonna move on to the next question. And I think this is a question maybe more for Adrian. What is a resource that you wish you knew existed when you were a pre-law student?
I'd have to think about that one for a bit, but I actually didn't know that there were opportunities to work at firms before you graduated. There's a ton of different opportunities where you can work for criminal justice firms as a volunteer. You can get internships doing it. I thought the lowest level position at a law firm was a paralegal or a legal assistant or an administrative assistant. And so I thought, oh, like when I'm in school, I'm not really qualified for that because I have no education yet. And I didn't actually know until my last semester at school that you can actually volunteer for social justice organizations. You can volunteer at law firms to help out. And that ultimately leads to internships. So it's more so, I didn't really realize how much you can push yourself out there and see what sticks. And I wish, looking back, that I had did more of that while I was in undergrad. I would say, to sum it up, volunteer opportunities are really good. They're a really good way to build your resume, especially even at Moorpark. You can volunteer at local organizations around this community. And it's a good way to not only have a leg up when you're applying for schools to transfer out, but it's just straight up good to have that experience when you graduate because it gives you a leg up in the industry that you're trying to work in. The first question they ask is not what's your GPA or where you went to school. The first question is where have you applied these skills? And I think it's important to remember that you can do more than just an internship or a job. It doesn't have to be paid to get yourself out there.
Absolutely. And I am currently applying to medical school. It is not social science oriented, but that is very, very true. It's not what you do, but how you did it and how you have grown and learned. So approaching any opportunity with that mindset in how you can integrate it into a core lesson that you have learned or something that it has showed you, and you can effectively communicate that to others is going to take you a very long way than just doing an opportunity for the sake of doing it. Okay, I think we will go ahead and move on to the next question, unless somebody knows of any fantastic pre-law resource. So this question seems more in Roberto's field. What's the difference between working for local government versus state government, state or federal government?
Yeah, so I think I'll take the first part of the question, and I think I was talking to Adrian earlier here on the call. Maybe she can take the second part as it relates to state government as well. But for local government, really, it's about interacting with the constituents on a daily basis. And so whether that's, taking their phone calls, whether that's community organizations reaching out to you, wanting to plan an event in your district, or even meeting with constituents and business owners in your area in person, because they actually want to see a face behind, the office, and get to know you. And so I think that's really what local government is about connecting, constituents to the right resources as well. And that goes for state and federal government as well. But I think that at the local government level, it's more out there, only because of the fact that, again, kind of touching on what I said earlier, is that you see those improvements in your daily life. And so when you report something like a broken street light, and within a couple of days it's fixed, like that's a noticeable improvement that you saw that wasn't there before. And so that's something that really highlights just the level of work that is done at local government.
And yeah, the second part of the question about state and federal government. So when I was doing campaign work, it very much intersected both. The changes truly made on the local level. A lot of what I was doing was grassroots campaigning, so it starts from the ground up. That's basically what that means. And you can see the change not only if you're working on, like, for example, a city council campaign or a city council type issue, you see the impacts directly in the city. But if you're working more for congressional or Senate, you start to see those changes, yes, locally, but more so nationally. And that's it kind of depends. I would say that changes made on the local level, that's something you have to know. But at the same time, you can make a bigger footprint and a bigger change doing it on the local level for things like congressional and Senate matters, because that ultimately you see that throughout the whole United States. That's the major difference. It's kind of, where are you targeting the change and where do you want to see it happen? And then you also have to remember that there's also a hierarchy of who has power. At the local level, they have discretion and jurisdiction over local matters. But if those aren't being addressed, you go to a higher up, who's maybe county or state, and you kind of climb the ladder to make the change. And that's what I've experienced and what I've seen on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's the major difference.
Great. So any last minute questions anybody has? Anything that anybody would like to add? Oh, we have a question from a student. Was anyone here a part of the honors club at Moorpark? I was part of the honors club at Moorpark College.
I was also part of the honors club, or honors program, and I definitely recommend it. I think it really gives you a boost when you're applying to more competitive universities. There's the TAP program and TAG. So definitely recommend you participate in the honors program. And if you have any other questions about that, definitely reach out to us at MC2UCLA@gmail.com, and we can give you some more information about that, and maybe get you acquainted with a mentor to support you on that.
I would also say, in addition to the honors program, there's a lot of honors societies. So if you have the opportunity to join one, I highly recommend to do it, because it's a great way to network, but it's also a really good thing to put on your resume. It's a good thing to put on applications. So the more the merrier.
Awesome. So we have our last question for the evening, or for the afternoon. How does one prepare for grad school? How to prepare for grad school? and anything that you might have wish you did earlier, or maybe something that you might have done a little too early and you wish you would have done it closer to actually applying for graduate school?
Yeah, so I can start with this question. I think what's important to consider for grad school is first and foremost, this is just, one of the truths, is having a competitive GPA. I think, whether we like it or not, GPA is something that many grad schools do consider. But also, Adrian was touching upon this earlier. It's, having experiences, but making sure you know how to express what you've learned from them. I think that's so important for so many applications, and especially for grad school applications, being able to, translate your experiences, what you've learned, and what they will look like when you're working within your field or studying within your field. And I think in terms of preparation for grad school, I think, like being once again, like open-minded, being genuinely interested in what you're studying. But like, for example, the master's program goes by so quickly, it's 2 years. So there will be a lot of networking involved. You will definitely need to think about what the next years of your life will look like. So definitely take advantage of all the opportunities that come to you while you are in grad school, and be ready to network and be ready to think about what career you want to go into.
I want to also just say, don't feel discouraged. When I transferred to Berkeley, I'm going to be honest, I got my butt kicked, absolutely kicked academically. I had never received anything lower than an A. And when I went there, I was very much a small fish in a very, very big pond. And I realized how competitive it was. I very much underestimated that. And I will say that there's more to applying to grad school than just your GPA. Yes, it's very important. But if you struggle or you don't have the GPA that maybe you wanted to apply to a school that you wanted, it's not a lost cause. You can complement your degree with work experience. You can complement your GPA with relevant experience. You can say like, okay, I had strengths in these classes and weaknesses in these. How do I illustrate that I have really good strengths in these fields? And then you use that to market yourself when you apply to grad school. And I think there's like 4 major parts to preparing for grad school that you have to remember. You have your GPA, yes. You need a degree, yes. But the 2 other factors that really matter are work experience and your network, because that work experience leads to more networking, and those networking opportunities lead to letters of rec, and that strengthens your application. So even if you don't have the GPA that you want, you can still really complement your application with a lot more.
I agree with that. Both Adriana and Adrian, thank you so much for that. And another point I wanted to make as well is, when you are applying to grad school, just what Adriana was saying earlier about really kind of having that statement of purpose kind of figured out, in that like they want to see, okay, yeah, you have the degree like Adrian mentioned, your GPA as well, but also how do you apply those skills that you've learned from your degree into your actual work experience, and what is it that you want to do with your graduate degree as well? That's something that they want to know, because they want to figure out, okay, how are you going to apply the skills that you get from this graduate degree out in the professional environment as well.
I do want to add one really important piece of information. At least within the field of clinical psychology, when you are applying to grad school, it's more about you are going to be matched with a mentor. So you're applying to work under one specific professor and doing research with them. So having a match with that mentor is extremely important. So there are times where, there's this really prestigious professor that you want to work with and you really admire them. But your resume also needs to reflect some overlap with their research interests. So I think that's something that I think a lot of fields within the social sciences kind of have. If your program is like a mentor matched style approach, making sure that whoever you're applying for, you legitimately have overlapping interests and you have, proof and evidence of work that is related to their work.
I'm glad you brought that up as well, Adriana, because you had me realize that a lot of the graduate school programs can be very different depending on where you go. So for example, my graduate program is one where I'm not matched with a mentor, nor do I have like a professor who's kind of helping me throughout the process. I'm just kind of taking my classes as I go along, and they're evening classes as well, like once or twice a week, for about 3 hours of those 2 days. And so that's something to take into consideration as well is, how do, if you want to apply to a graduate school and you also maybe want to work a full-time job in your career field, in Adriana's program, it might not be possible to work a full-time job while also going to school. So kind of being able to understand and see what your options are as far as what kind of graduate school program you want to be in, and that's super important.
And just adding to that, graduate school is a really, really big financial decision. It's not something you do on a whim. It's something that you prepare for, you think about it in undergrad, and you figure out if it's really something you want to pursue. It's not just something that you just wake up one day and you go, okay, I want to go to grad school. Like, no, like sometimes it can be upwards to $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 in debt that you have to really think, is this going to be worth it? And am I going to do what I want to do with this new degree that I am using to complement my undergrad? So I think it's really important to think about all the factors that go into grad school, as well as using the opportunities that you have in undergrad to prepare for that. Don't let those opportunities go. Take advantage of them. And you're going to be overwhelmed with the amount of opportunities that you see as you go through undergrad.
Yeah, this was all really great advice. I would also like to reiterate, when making the decision to apply to grad school, at least I could speak from a medical school standpoint, really look into the programs that you're applying to, because not each program is truly created equally. We might want to think that any grad school is great, but there are some grad schools that do things better than other grad schools. For instance, I will use medical school as an example. There's some medical schools that are more oriented towards research. There's more medical schools that are more oriented towards community service. And similarly, correct me if I'm wrong, Adriana, but I'm sure there's a lot of psychology programs that might be more oriented towards a particular field in psychology for that instance. So also recognize, as Adriana mentioned, to have overlap between a PI that you are working with. You also want to have overlap between your life experiences and what you can bring to the school, um, on top of how they can invest in you. So when you approach graduate school as this is a mutual agreement, like I got something that you want and you have something that I want, it makes the process a lot more, it makes it less stressful, and it also gives you a newfound sense of confidence when you go about your decisions. So that is something to consider, and always try to talk to people who have done the experience as well. If you are applying to law school, try to find somebody who also applied to law school and just ask them, what do you recommend? What's something that you made a mistake on while you were applying that you hope doesn't happen to other people? For instance, for me, I didn't know that a part of the medical school application process, when I submit the application, I actually have to go back and check some boxes. And this is really silly, but it resulted in a few of my medical school applications not being submitted for like a month. And I completely didn't know. And if I would have had somebody tell me that, this is a situation that could happen, I might have approached that a little differently, which could have changed the way that the outcome of what's currently happening for me, such as Adrian, with her Berkeley situation regarding the 18 other schools. Maybe if she was to now that she conveyed that information to whoever's viewing, you might double check your registrar transcripts. So you might call the schools to make sure they receive them. So all of these things are food for thought.
Yeah,
You
definitely.
reminded me. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say a lot of what Fadia shared about medical school, I think overlaps with a lot of social science grad school programs. And we were bringing up networking, and networking isn't just with professionals in the field, but also peers, like someone who is 1 year ahead of you or someone who just did what you're doing. And for grad school, you can definitely email a professor, find students that are currently in that year's cohort, and most people are really open to answering questions and providing advice. So definitely reach out to whoever you can, even if it's a peer.
I was going to say, one major piece of advice that I completely left out, which is bad, is that you should be doing informational interviews with people, whether it be for grad school, whether it be for jobs, industries, clubs. Just ask people if they want to get coffee and talk about how they got to where they are. People love to talk about themselves. And honestly, when you're doing informational interviews, it's not only a really good way to network and meet people, but it's a good way to share about yourself. And then whoever you're talking with may be like, hey, I know this person who's hiring for this thing and you would be a great fit. You never know what it can lead to, is what I'm saying. And also, my second piece of advice is, at Moorpark College, there is a class that I took. I think it's 1 unit, and it's called Student Success. That helped me so much. I had no clue what I wanted to do. And in that class, they taught me how to recognize my skills, recognize my weaknesses, and how to get around that. And that was really important. Even though this credit, I don't even think it transferred, just taking that class, it really empowered me. It allowed me to realize, like, hey, there's more to life than just what you think you're good at and what you think you're bad at. You can get better at things. You can branch out. And that's actually where I first learned about what informational interviews are. You just meet up with somebody, you get a drink, you get coffee, whatever, and you just talk about how they got to be where they are. And I think that's really important as you're going through your undergrad to know.
Okay, I think this concludes our social science webinar. Is there any last minute things that the panelists would like to mention? Right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in to our social science webinar. We will be continuing the rest of our webinar series with a STEM webinar coming up. So please be on the lookout for that email from MC2UCLA. But once again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions about MC2UCLA, or if you would like to further connect with any of the panelists.